Well, as the U.S. ramps up its campaign to isolate Iran, Iraq is also feeling pressure from the White House. The U.S. is punishing Iraqi militias and politicians who are supported by Iranian officials, deepening that rift between Washington and Baghdad. And this comes as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo makes his way to the Middle East. He'll be speaking to officials in Kuwait, Israel, and Lebanon about U.S. efforts to contain Iran. Behnam Ben Taleblu joins me now from Washington. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. So, Behnam, how is the U.S. punishing Iraqi officials with ties to Iran?
Well, great to be with you again, Rita. Essentially, the U.S. is looking to wield economic power as political power here. Just a few weeks ago, the U.S. designated for the first time under the Trump administration this terror group called Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba. This is basically a group in 2015 which promised to march on Baghdad if Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, ordered them. So they're an Iraqi Shia militia owned or controlled by Iran and have actually helped Iran fight in Syria. So these are the types of entities the U.S. is trying to stigmatize through an economic designation, through asset freezes, visa bans, these kind of things of the entire group. Now, the U.S. may look to escalate pressure over the coming weeks to target other Shiite militias operating in Iraq, some of which may hold seats in parliament, as well as the networks that provide them with material support.
You talk about the White House potentially putting more pressure, but has Iraq responded to all of this?
You know, Iraq is always a contested territory, contested between the Arab world and between the different flanks of the Arab world, between the different ideologies of the Arab world, and in the present day, since the 2003 war between the U.S. and Iran. There are politicians in Iraq who want to favor moving Baghdad towards Tehran, and there's politicians who want to make Baghdad be more oriented towards Washington. So the U.S. has to really step up its game here as part of this fight, because Iran's President Rouhani had a great 3-day trip to Iraq looking to score points at home and abroad, and to contrast the way Iranian officials visit Iraq with the way American officials visit Iraq. So it's very much a contested game here.
You know, Behnam, when you look at this really isn't the first rift between the U.S. and Iraq. Iraqi leaders didn't like the Trump administration telling them, you've got to comply with these U.S. sanctions against Iran, especially because there were some countries that were exempt from that. Is the White House at all concerned with its relationship with Baghdad?
I think the White House is concerned, which is why you've actually seen waivers given by this administration to Iraq so that it can continue to purchase Iranian gas for power generation and electricity generation purposes. The question is, how long will some of these waivers go on, and how important is it for the administration to have a genuine max pressure strategy towards Iran? Because if you do have a max pressure strategy towards Iran, you want to altogether reduce or eliminate the number of waivers and exemptions you grant other countries. Now, to be fair, the type of exemption Iraq got was qualitatively different from what China and India get, because they get waivers to purchase oil.
Right, which makes a big difference. But I do want to ask you, though, there are plans under the State Department to start to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terror group. It actually would be the first time that the U.S. would deem another government's military as a terrorist entity. You know, this would also impact Iraqi militias. What do you think, though, when you step back big picture, what does that mean?
It means that if you look back really far out, big picture, since October 2007, this is a debate that Washington has been entertaining. And in October 2017, the Trump administration designated the entire Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps under counterterrorism authorities that exist in the Treasury Department. What you are mentioning now is to make that move over more officially into the State Department and add this entity to the foreign terrorist organizations list. It's the same penalty, the asset freeze plus a visa ban, of course, but it further stigmatizes the Guard Corps, and it makes sure that the sanctions stick to Iran, because terrorism designations are qualitatively more sticky, because, of course, no one wants to do business with a bank, financial institution, person that is a designated terrorist. And as we know about Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, military activities and the export of the revolution are only the tip of what they do. They have a vast financial empire, which is how they look to co-opt the Iraqi state.
You know, we mentioned earlier Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is heading to the Middle East to continue the U.S. campaign to counter Iran. You know, he already alienated some European allies on this issue. How might his approach to Middle East leaders take form when it comes to this issue of Iran?
I think within the region, the administration has had and will continue to have remarkable success. Where the administration is falling behind, of course, is operationalizing its own call to push back on Iran. It needs to define what it means to push back on Iran. All those states that the Secretary Pompeo is traveling to, Israel, Lebanon, Kuwait, they face a military, political, and economic threat from Iran, a threat to subvert the state from below, and a threat to pressure the state from top with Iranian hard power. So there is a receptive audience for Pompeo in these three states. With Europe, of course, it's more complicated because they're looking to keep the nuclear deal alive, and the U.S. has left the deal on May 8th and restored sanctions that it previously waived.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.